Well, I'm grateful that you're here this evening. Am I broadcasting?
Yeah.
Great, that's good news for me. And so I thought in terms of just making a few remarks before I begin the lesson tonight. We're going to be starting with Matthew chapter 20. You might be finding that. Today really marks the first 3 months of Dot and me being here with you. And there's a few things that I just wanted to throw out there for you to give some consideration to. One, we've been handing out a lesson every time that I get up and speak. I'm not doing that tonight because I forgot to do it. But I wonder if that's beneficial to you. If it's something that you want, we will continue to do it. But if it's not something that's beneficial, then we won't continue to do it. So just give that some thought, and you can touch base with me. And if nobody says anything, I'm going to take that as it's not beneficial, okay? And so I want very much to do that. I've done it for all the years that I've preached, but you stop and think about it, that's every week. And if I'm teaching on Wednesday night, that's 2 or 3 times a week. And so it's not a big deal. I just want to know what you think about that. Secondly, in speaking about our growth factor here, I want you to know that I haven't really worked hard at all to get out and stir up the neighborhood out here, because I didn't think that we were quite ready for that. And it's so easy to get locked into just us 4 and no more that we don't know exactly how to treat our neighbor when they come in. Sometimes we smother them by too many of us, shall we say, gathering around them, and sometimes we don't even acknowledge the fact that they're here. And so the visitation that follows, we will have a visitation group here beginning in the next 3 months, wherein we'll be given assignments to go. But right now, I'm pretty well handling that, or should I say Dot and I are pretty well handling that. And it's not been something that's bad, it's just something that's time consuming, and the preacher cannot handle everything. And so we look at it with the idea of it's a joint thing, and I have to understand that we come in from far places, that we're not all right here in the community. I spent some time, Dot and I did yesterday after we left here, working in the building, over with Pam and Jeff, and we talked to them about outreach in the community because they live in the community. And so we're going to work in having what I call a neighborhood Bible study at that house. Now there's got to be some things accomplished before that we can do that over there, but they're willing to do it. But there's some things in that family that we need to work through in order to accomplish that. And so in looking at visitors, we only have had 2 or 3 visitors at a time, but there'll be a situation where we'll have 10 or 15 visitors. And we have to learn how to handle that without throwing up our hands and quitting. So there's always going to be the possibility that we miss somebody, but I'd rather not if it's at all possible. And I'm going to need, and this will have to come from me, or from us here, I'm going to need what I call a flyer, and you may have some in the office, I don't know, that talks about the Neatville Church of Christ, so that I can hand it to the merchants in town, and they can take a quick look, not words just really jammed together, but bullet points of what we offer to the community. And we have to have that, because when I visit all the places here that have businesses, I can be able to talk with the idea of saying, here's what we have now, not what we used to have or what we're planning on having, but what we have now. And it wouldn't hurt to have a few bullets on, here's what we're doing right now, and we're preparing for you people to come in. I put a phone call in to the lady that's in charge of the park over here. I think she's a youth park person, and she hadn't returned my call, and normally that means that I don't want to return your call. And I don't mind that. There are other places that we can do it. But as soon as the weather is nice, why, we'll have a prayer session away from the building or else in the building parking lot out here so people can see us. But after we get around in the community and say a few things about ourselves. Right now, the building, when you look at the building from the road, it looks a whole lot different than it did just 2 weeks ago. It looks fresh and clean in some areas we're still working on it, but within the next month we'll pretty well have this particular area on the outside of the building all fixed up in a nice way, and hopefully have a little better lighting so that when we turn the lights on at night, it's not dark around here, so you can see around the building and people can see what's going on here. We will have children here, and we're in the process now. Some are working on our classrooms. And another thing that we noticed, that when we have a baptism with a lady, the ladies' room is all the way down, let me make sure I'm looking, all the way down at the end of the fellowship hall. Well, when they come out of the baptistry and the water's dripping off of them, that's just too far to walk. So what we have to have is some area up here around the baptistry wherein that we can keep the ladies' garments and keep the men's garments so that we can dress right in the area here where the baptistry is. Now, we know that the steps in the baptistries at this point in the baptistry is not the way they should be. We plan on correcting that, but it's kind of a dangerous situation. And when we baptized Pam last week, she said that is a very dangerous way to get up because those steps are hard to climb up. Now, all I'm going to say is, if you don't understand that, go out there and climb up the steps. And try to realize that you're in a garment that you're working on, that you're very nervous because of what's going to take place. And you don't know what's going to happen when you look down in the baptistry. Look at it sometimes. And so I always go down first so I can help the person down those stairs. And so there's just convenient things that we have to work on in order to have this, what I call, very friendly for people who are not us, people who are coming in from the community and so forth. Now what I want to talk to us about tonight, I'm going to talk to us about the idea of servant leadership. I'm teaching leadership in the morning. In the class out here, we have maybe 10, 12 people show up, and we're happy. We would like to have a few more, but we work with what we have. But we're talking about working with new Christians. That's going to be the assignment of some of the people in our Bible class out here. We need to have what I call a follow-up on everyone that's immersed into Christ. Body life is what I'm talking about. And so what we'll do in mentoring, and that's the word that I'm going to use, we used to call it discipling, but a group of people use the word discipling in a wrong way, and when you say discipling anymore, you act like that's not something that's any good. However, it's a Bible thought, it's a Bible word, but mentoring hasn't got a bad situation. When I get through talking about mentoring tonight, you'll know about that. And so, in looking at training people to work, we're going to find out that the people that are brought to Christ are going to be good workers, because somebody reached out to them and they're going to be wanting to know, how do we do these things? And so I have to start out in the class out here, and if it has to go on for 6 months or a year, I don't care. I just wanted to get people that would be willing to help work with new Christians. And a lot of our new Christians will have children, small children. And I'll ride up and down the road and I'll talk to people that have children. Look, we don't have any children. We have some teenagers, and God bless them. We're grateful for them. But they don't like to be called children. They like to be called young people. And so we don't want to make them feel bad, but basically we're going to have what I call ankle biters, little guys, and they're going to step on your corns and things like that, and they're going to be a little noisy, and we'll have to learn how to contend with that. And that's what we do when we are learning the biblical portion of it. But tonight I'm going to talk more about the practical portion of this. Matthew chapter 20, if you'll look at verse 25 with me, we'll begin to read. Actually, I'll start at verse 24. And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the 2 brothers. Now, the setting of this story is the fact that the 2 brothers wanted to have a place of prominence with Jesus. That's what they wanted. And so it's the idea of they wanted to be treated special. And the other 10, they didn't like that particularly. But Jesus called them to himself and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. And so, in looking at that, he says, if you want to be prominent, learn to be a servant. And I call that Jesus-style leadership. Jesus teaches us how to really get people to like us and to be careful around us to try to encourage rather than to discourage. And so in looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 1, Paul said, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. There's what I call Paul's style leadership, submissive and service. In 1 Peter 5 and verse 3, he says, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. That's called elder style leadership, submissive and service. So I'm going to do a few thoughts about mentoring, okay? The first thought I have is mentoring defined. What am I talking about when I say mentoring? And I'm going to say it's defined as an advisor, a wise and trusted counselor who teaches, and later those who break new ground and set new trends from the standpoint of how to reach people that are lost. Mentors have no gender codes. Titus 2 will deal with that. And inadequate, confused, conflicted, significant others cause many to emulate warped ways. And so all of us can trace people who have deeply affected our lives. Now, let me just talk to you. If I were to ask you to tell me 4 people that had a major effect of your life in growing up that has helped you in your life as Christians that are growing up, can you think of 4? Now, I can think of more than 4, but I can think of 4. When I look back at my new Christian life, when I became a Christian, I was about 19 years old. And so my significant person was my wife. That was one of them. Her family, her dad especially, was another one in my life. So through the years, I began to look at people that would help me grow up in Christianity. And we worshiped in a little congregation in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And so you look around and look for somebody that can be helpful. We had 2 elders, but they didn't understand. They were older, didn't have time, and didn't feel like putting any, shall I call it, energy into a new Christian. So that's not where I was able to be mentored to grow up. Then, as things happened, we moved our business up to Central Florida in Ocala, and I ran across somebody up there that basically was able to give me a helping hand. And in giving me a helping hand would help me learn how to pray, would help me not only do that, but how to teach a lesson, and help me how to talk to people who were having a difficulty. And I just began to put things together. And then, after a couple of years, we moved to Lubbock, Texas, and went to the Sunset International Bible Institute. When we got out there, man, did I have a bunch of mentors. And so when I went through the 2-year program, they hired me at Sunset to be one of the ministers there and to be one of the elders later. And I had to learn how to do that, to help others. And so there are a lot of good things that you can read, good books that you can read that's not going to teach you how to be a preacher, not going to teach you how to be an elder in the church. However, it will help you learn how to associate with people so you can meet the needs that they have, and learn the people that are always going to be, shall I say, wanting all of your attention, and you don't have all that attention to give to just one person. So you have to learn in terms of, what did Paul do? What did Jesus do? And so I put spiritual mentoring in Scripture. Jesus mentored the 12. Now, when I say he mentored them, he taught them, but he lived with them, so to speak. He was there for them. He selected them. Do you remember how long he prayed before he selected them? All night. And so the ones that we're going to be working with are going to be some that have been on a journey and just finally have come to an understanding of the truth, and they form opinions of us that are in the congregation from the standpoint of who can we go and talk to if we need to talk to somebody. And so Paul mentored the Ephesian elders in Acts chapter 20, beginning with verse 18, and he said to them, "In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work we must help the weak publicly and from house to house." And I put mentoring takes time, and Paul spent 3 years working in helping them grow the church. And so everybody that becomes a Christian is not going to know all the things, the depth that we have as far as what the Bible says. Most of them won't know the difference between the Old and New Testament. A lot of them won't know the difference between the reason we do not have women preachers and just have men preachers, and men lead the service. They don't understand that. And so we've got to be able to teach them. I remember a young couple that we taught and led to Christ at Westbury, and I remember that after they were baptized into Christ, she says, "I've got to ask you a very personal question." And I said, "Sure." And she says, "I want to know why we don't have women leading singing. I want to know why we don't have women leading prayer. I want to know why we don't have women preaching." Now, you know, I could have just really blasted her, and I tell you what, if you ever shot a 12-gauge shotgun and you took a juice can like a grapefruit juice or a tomato juice and set it up on the post and you blast it with a 12-gauge shotgun, it just tears it every way. Now I dare you to try to put it back like it was before you shot it with a shotgun. A lot of times when we are not thinking, we can do that to somebody by not having the right attitude and not having a relationship with them. So I remember setting up a Bible study with her and some of the friends, ladies that were members of the church there at Westbury with her, and we studied the passages that deal with that in a study of 1 Timothy 2 and 1 Corinthians 14, and a lot of passages that deal with that. And so I call mentoring a spiritual thing. And Paul says, "I was with you." You remember Priscilla and Aquila? That's who we mentored. They mentored a fellow by the name of Apollos. Took him home to eat with them because when he was preaching he had a good message, but it wasn't a complete message. And you've studied that as well as I have. And so in looking at this takes time. It's not going to happen in just an hour, but the common Christian person, the good Christian person, if we have some that are younger and some that are older, we can kind of match you up with by age and maybe even by where you live, so that you don't have to drive 25 miles to be involved in touching the life of someone. I've been to most of your houses. Some of you live out where you almost fall off the world. And so, but I found your place and I've enjoyed being with you. And so I'm just simply saying this, that it takes time to do that. Listen, winsome mentors attract followers. Winsome means generally pleasing and engaging. Some special people in our lives, and you can name some special people in your life. I'm going to give you an illustration I'll probably give you in the past, but I'll give it to you again. When I was a student at Falling Water Elementary School, we had 4 classrooms and 8 grades of students. some of our 8th graders were 17 and 18 years old. You know, they were big old guys, big gals. Matter of fact, we could have a pretty good basketball team just using our 9th and 10th graders because they were so much older. We were in a mountain community, falling water, and we had mountain there. And so what the older guys would do, and I was a little guy, skinny, tall, little. I didn't weigh 120 pounds. And you know, I wasn't, nobody feared me. I couldn't put a muscle up on my arm. But what they would do in the morning when we would come in the front door of the school building, about 4 or 5 of them would line up on one side of the hall, and 4 or 5 of them would line up on the other side of the hall. And when you walked in, one of them would grab you and shove you across the hall. And the one on the other side would grab you and shove you back. And by the time you got down through there, took you less than 2 or 3 minutes, wow, your hair wasn't combed. No, it wasn't combed that well when I left the house. I said I had a cow lick. I was milking the cow, and the cow turned around and licked my hair, and there it was, you see. But I thought, that's bad, but that's life. Every one of us had somebody that was really concerned about us. I remember when I went to work, we had to leave Tennessee and go to Florida because of a sick child. And so we picked up and left, didn't have a job. When I got down there, I was a new Christian. When I got down, Dot was a Christian from the time she's 12, 13 years old. But I wasn't. I was 19 years old when I was baptized. And so I had a whole lot of new things that were coming after me, a new wife, a new place to live. And I want you to know that some of those things were pretty rough. And so when I got down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, I went to congregation there in Hollywood, Florida, and a guy came up to me with a little bitty newspaper article. And it said, wanted, tool and die makers. Gave me an address and a phone number. I went and checked it out. And I was just going into my 3rd year apprenticeship. I got there and I got to talk to the owner of the shop. And he found out I was a member of the church, and I found out that he was a member of the church. I learned a lot from a fellow by the name of Paul Spicer. I learned a lot. Sometimes when we'd go on vacation, why, he'd loan us his car because it had air conditioning in it. He didn't have to do that, but he did that. He did some things. Now, when Paul got older, I became his mentor, but things changed, you see. But I thought in terms of, wow, winsome people. You are winsome people because you are children of God. You are the elect that we read about in the Bible. And I put strong mentors show us how to live. Learning to sing as a child, using hand signals. How about marriage enrichment classes in our homes, taking the initiative in serendipitous situations, helping with sick children, helping and visiting people. I remember going on my first visit. I was scared to death, going to the hospital and see people. It was with Ann Day, Dot and I were last week. And we had a marvelous time with her. We looked forward to it. I remember in one of my classes like we are having out here, I had a fellow in there by the name of D. Claude. D was a cotton farmer. He had all kinds of equipment. He farmed about maybe 1,000 acres, maybe a section and a half. A section is some 600 plus acres. And he wanted to go to the hospital with me. So I took him to the hospital, and when we got in the hospital, the lady that we was visiting had water in her lungs, and they came in there. We were in there talking with her, and took a big needle and pushed it into her, between her ribs, and pulled that water out of there. And I looked over there at her, but I looked at Dee, and Dee was standing by the wall, and he was sliding down the wall. He had never seen anything like that. And I had to go now and help him and get him back up on his feet and out in the hall so he could revive, you know. And so that's what I call mentoring, helping people in a situation like that. And so learning to sing. I sang in a band for a long time. I don't think I was a great singer, but I was smart enough to have backup singers before backup singers were possible. And so we had a great time. We had a great alto singing woman and a great soprano singing woman and poor old Brother Bill. But I learned a lot about singing. I've got a book at home right now with 80 songs in it that we used to sing. And we never played in any, all we're members, we never played anywhere with any kind of church music or anything. We strictly played good songs. A lot of songs that are country music are not good songs. So you have to learn how to pick them out. And so, but we had a pretty good group, and we had opportunity to meet people and convert them. It was something that was very special. And so, faithful mentors then inspire hope in us. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, the text says, don't lose heart, though outwardly wasting away, inwardly, day by day, we're being renewed day by day. And so we can live 30 days without food, 3 weeks without sleep, 7 days without water, 12 minutes without air, and no time without hope. We need to give people hope. Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he says, I become all things to all men, that by all means I might save some. Now, that doesn't mean he went down to the bar and drunk, whatever the right word is there. He didn't do that. What he did was become transparent to them. If you read the life of Paul, he didn't mind talking about the mistakes that he made in his life. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he talks about here is a way to be a super servant, a servant of the Lord. And he gives us some indication how to do that. Well, having somebody to mentor you or being involved in mentoring someone, I put down here that that's an important thing, showing them how to live the Christian life. If you walk down the hall and someone comes up to you and say, how are you doing? Most of the time you're going to say great. Or at least good. When on the inside you may be a mess. We wear a mask. We have a mask that we wear. And so we have to understand if we have masks, then the people that we meet have masks. And we've got to learn how to help them. And the way we help them is by being transparent. I never smoked. I never drank. And I could say, those were 2 bad habits that I never caught. But I caught some other bad habits. I had bad things come out of my mouth that I can't believe that I was saying. And so as a new Christian, I knew I had to quit doing that. And so I did my best and probably went a month or 2 without even saying any kind of a bad word. But circumstances can give you difficulty there. And so I was changing oil in my car, and I had my head under the hood pouring some oil back in it, and Doc slipped over and blew the horn. I raised up. My head hit the hood, and my head went back down. My chin hit where I was pouring it in. It was a 49 Oldsmobile, had a big high oil thing there. And you can do that 10 times before you know it. And when I came out from under that hood, I wasn't saying the Lord's Prayer. And the lady up on the hill was a member of the church, and she got up and dusted her apron off and went in the house. And here I am, a member where she is. I had to have help to learn how to quit, to learn how to change. And so wonderful when I had the opportunity to learn about nouthetic counseling, where the idea of Bible counseling works. And so that's what we're involved in. We work together, Doc and I do. And so we've got pressure at work. We got stress at home. We have disillusionment with our spouse sometimes. But with God, and we are with God, we are stuck in what I call a spirit situation, secular environment that will help us in our waking hours to zero in on having spiritual and listening to spiritual input. It's easy to think, I alone, Lord, am the only person who ever felt like this. But that's not true. Everybody feels like that. All of us have inadequacy. And so sometimes we want to look for a pity party. A pity party. A gray head bobbing as a mentor strides ahead of the pack, and he's been there and done that. Looking for another pity party. I am not ashamed of, shall I say, groups coming together and working through situations. In our neighborhood Bible studies, we have opportunity to talk about that, to talk about how you overcome this and how you make this work and so forth. So there's always a lot of pressure on us. I have pressure on me from time to time from a lot of different places, a lot of places. And so you do too. But that just makes us more equipped to be able to handle it. I put down here, we can have flawed mentors, but we have a flawless Messiah. We have a flawless Jesus. All too soon, we learn that our mentors have feet of clay. You're going to learn that. You're going to be a mentor and you're going to say something or do something. You're going to say, why in the world did I do that? And you're going to learn how to say, please forgive me. And looking at the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's Matthew chapter 5, and I guess about verse 3. And so when you stop and think about that, Jesus gave that in his first sermon that he preached, in the sermons that he preached in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. I said, remember when you found out your parents weren't perfect? My heart broke when my son saw some of my flaws. Wise men don't know all the answers. We feel some of this loss too. When sheep realize their shepherds are not perfect, the awareness can be painful. In spite of and because of human imperfection, the best mentors know how to point others to Jesus, the only flawless mentor. He was tempted in every way just as we are, but without sin. So good spiritual leaders know they are leaders, but not lords. They're skillful guides, but not gods. So it's kind of a show and tell life that I'm talking about. All of us have points in our life that we're weak in. We have those things. And I thought in raising children, here's a wonderful possibility in helping them. My children helped me in a whole lot of my growing up as a young Christian man. You know, it was just something very special. And so when you stop and think about servant leadership, you think in terms of all of us have the ability to lead somebody. And all of us have a need to be led by somebody. Jesus Christ is the perfect one to lead. He had no sin, but he had a heart that could be touched. He had a heart that could give you hope. And so when you read his writings and you read when he speaks and so forth, people just like to hear him. I have, I think, a gift in teaching. I think people like to hear me teach. And if you don't right now, well, you'll learn to. Because I have a joy in doing that. And I try to put a little humor in the things that I say. But I know every one of you have the same problems that I have. And so I don't mind sharing with you and allowing you to see that I am not perfect. I am a sinner saved by grace through Christ Jesus. Want to be in Christ Jesus. And that's what you are. And so it amazes me how many people are kind of back office to a preacher. They don't want to get too close to the preacher because, and especially if you're a counselor. If you're a counselor, I'm talking about a real go-to-school type counselor or whatever, they think you can read their mind. Sometimes you can. Because we are all pretty much alike. And so when we become a congregation that is a flourishing congregation, and we will become that if we follow the teachings of Jesus, we just have to be ready to handle that. And you're going to be interested to find out how much fun that is. Brother and Sister Fletcher, Ken and his wife, and basically they're mid-80s now, and we're good friends with them. But when we had our New Christians class, they were in that. And he had served as an elder in the church, but he had never been taught how to deal with new Christians. And so he wanted to do that. And so it was such a marvelous thing to watch him. When we have a new Christian, what we try our best to do is to have 7 or 8 couples that can go and share with them while they get their feet on the ground find out who we really are. They're going to learn more about the Church of Christ from you than they are from me, because I'm going to be up here preaching, and I preach kind of shotgun style. This person needs a little of this person needs a little bit of that, and try my best to touch where you need help. But one of my responsibilities as a preacher is to be a good mentor. And so I'm happy whenever I'm working with somebody, and I know you will be too, when you find out just how much you know about the church and how much you know about Christianity. Time's gone. I've learned to start on time, quit on time. That's not a bad trait for a preacher. And so in looking at servant leadership or mentoring, in our class out here we're going to go in depth on that. I just kind of give you a biblical principle so that you know that discipling or mentoring is a biblical thought. How many years did Jesus spend with the 12? Over three plus years. And he's the best teacher in the world. And it's amazing to me when some of those apostles, teachers, had to have a refresher course. And the Holy Spirit gave them a refresher course in preparing them to mentor, to do like we're talking about. So that's just kind of I throw that lesson in there. It's what I call a bridge lesson to go from where we've been studying in the last 3 months to the new studies that we'll be working in as we prepare ourselves to be involved in something like this. So don't let it scare you. Just look for the doors that will open. Every one of you are important. Every one of you are special to God. Every one of you are loved by God. And you are God's mouth here on this earth where we live. We're going to sing a song of invitation. And the invitation would be for someone who's not a Christian, that would like to become a Christian, or somebody who would like to study to be a Christian, or somebody that just needs the prayers of the church. And so if you'll stand, we'll be singing a song of invitation.
I have decided